here from House Hengist Comics, and welcome back to the channel, and thanks for your continued support, guys. Really appreciate it. Today it is Blitzkrieg, episode 28, part of the Skyblitz operations over Holland, Moerdijk, part 1. First, we're going to examine the news, and we'll return basically to the operational plan or map, full gelb or case yellow as it was basically referred to. There were two plans, in fact. The October plan, very similar to the Schlieffen plan, which was replaced in 1940 by Manstein's, but this may have been also in part due to a famous air crash known as the Mechelin incident. And this is still celebrated today. And with this information that the Belgians recovered, it was passed on to basically the French, and Gamelin was convinced it was going to be a variant. But in fact, because of this, Student becomes quite involved in Manstein's plan, and he starts to use the basis of his ideas and experience, because he dropped basically troops into Denmark and also into Norway. He's also using gliders for the first time with this decisive attack at Eben-Emael, which basically knocks all the Allied plans and timings out of shape immediately. And we've done that in the very first episode on this series in YouTube, so do revisit that. We've also done an episode 17, Lost Luggage in Dordrecht. And here we started to explore the parachute operations, and the follow-up to that is Devil's Bridge, so do watch those. Now this really gave us the confidence to go for these big drops, and what is really important is obviously it is about only one division dropping in Holland, not masses of troops but lots of logistics and aircraft. And in this regard they get unlucky because the Dutch put up a really good anti-aircraft defense, and they lose a lot of aircraft, and that will have a knock-on effect in Krieg. So if we return to the Dutch plan, we can see that there's a huge corridor of parachute drops between the 12th and 14th of May. And these are basically at The Hague, at Rotterdam, Dordrecht, and at number 1 point, Moerdijk. Now, what is important is also the French are racing up here. We've done the Leeuwarden operations as well in the north with the cavalry. They're trying to hook round Winkelman, well, Kuchler's men are, and basically threaten Amsterdam from the rear. So the parachute drop is also going to be a really chaotic thing, and I want you to think about basically the similarities between this and obviously Market Garden in 1944. There are huge similarities. It is a season hold. But if we get to the actual scope for this battle, we're just looking at Moerdijk, and she is basically at Hollandsdiep, which is basically Holland's Deep, and it's 1 kilometer wide. It's a massive bridge with land and a rail bridge. And this video, the Battle of the Netherlands, is really good, and I keep saying watch this. Now the Dutch have only got 22 infantry battalions and 44 strategic border defence forces, not a lot of men. As I've said throughout this series, much of what Holland is trying to do is buy time for the Allies using defences upon these bridges, demolition charges, and anything that can slow down and impede the German advance so the Allies can get there. But let's look now at what the German forces are today, because we are looking at 7th Flieger Division. That was its nomenclature effectively at the time. It is in fact 1st Parachute Division. And these are from the Fallschirmjäger, and they are fearless veteran. These are some of the best troops the Germans have, led by great leaders, and they are pioneers as well in this type of warfare. They're going to be supported by combat engineers who will be making the first drop, racing for the bridge to try and remove the demolition charges. They're low on mortars and support weapons. They've got some heavy machine guns because they wanted to travel light. But Schwarzmann, an interesting character, is also here. He is to win the Knight's Cross, and this is quite controversial, but we'll get into this later. A big problem, they're dropping with canisters, so they aren't armed and only pistol armed. Great work on this is Bruce Quarry's, and I suggest you look at this if you want to understand the German formations better. But let's look at the Dutch forces now. What have they got? Well, they've got a lot of anti-aircraft. They've got one platoon on table, one off table. They're basically a bridge detachment commanded by a guy called Maragin, and they've got 2 heavy machine gun platoons, but most of this is just infantry really, and basically they needed to keep this bridge open to guide their retreat back. And they're not expecting an airborne carpet. They've only got 2 guns here and some anti-tank weapons as well. So not a lot, rating from confident trains to conscript. So when we were doing the research for this, we had to look at a huge amount of information in a short period of time. We looked at obviously the black and white photographs, look at the span on that bridge. It's 12 sections, I think. The bomb damage as well here at Moerdijk. We consulted all possible sources to try and get the best possible interpretation of what was going on. Obviously the maps are very important, and they're showing obviously the surrounding islands which had artillery placed supportment, so the Dutch will have off-table artillery. There are also Wacht ships we identified in this map and from the sources as well, including the landing zones. We used aerial photographs, again very, very useful, difficult really from a wargaming sense, but we then realized it was so big we had to sort of compress the set. We also use Skyblitz as well, although a propaganda film. Recommend that on YouTube, guys. So when we get to the mission and the set, what is this about? Well, the Germans are going to have to basically jump in onto this, effectively secure both bridges, remove the demolition charges and hold it, and they will have only 12 turns to do so. In building this, there are a number of other key critical events which occur. I don't want to bring those out now, but we'll discuss those in the second episode. So we've had to compress the set but try and get the key features in here, try and make the town itself, Moerdijk, look as similar as we could, and include things like the local woods, because this is bad landing areas, the irrigation ditches and things like that. A compressed town, difficult for both sides, and key to this will be random deployment. No one's going to really know what's going on, and it's the way to really conduct this type of operation. Civilians again present, dense lines of sight, complex issues, ideal for what we're trying to do. So I think this photograph was really what I used to work on for the town, and ultimately it's 12 turns, guys. So let's get into the action. The Ju-52s start to descend over their drop zone. Basically flak fire is coming in all over the place from the Dutch. One battery is on table, one is off. Effectively all deployment is concealed, and what you can see here are the airstrikes that are going against these concealed cars. As they're revealed, we see what's there, and fortunately the Dutch have artillery and infantry around that bridge, which is really rather critical. They've got another infantry platoon in the town, and some of that infantry around the bridge is dug in, which is most fortunate. In addition to that, basically we've got all the charges set here, but no wires connecting them. We'll get into that into the second game. Within the town there is anti-tank guns, but they've got no HE, and we've also got basically two machine gun platoons literally back to back, making a very strong point. So it's not going to be easy. There's also infantry at the farm, and the AA is just in front of the bridge. So let's get cracking. The ME-109s come in low, open fire, but they've basically drawn dummy cards. Their rounds basically spitting across the landscape with no effect. The Dutch are pinned by basically shock and awe, and pinned if they're hit by an air attack, and their Stukas do hit. They hit the trench line in front of the bridge, and they inflict basically 8 casualties and cause lots of problems. The target, the main target for the pioneers who are to land in the first wave, is this bridge house. They've got to dismantle the demolition. And effectively the Stukas now fly off, and what we now see is basically the first waves coming in. These are the pioneers, and effectively what we see is the jump. Now players can opt to go high or low altitude. If you go low altitude, you're easier to hit, but your dispersal on landing is tighter, and effectively that's what the pioneers do. But oh my god, the second aircraft is completely shot out of the sky, and effectively only 3 teams land. One then dies on landing and it becomes pinned. It's a disaster. The Pioneers are at 50% and we've got real problems for Schwarzman, but he's close to a crater and he's going to take the best opportunity he can to move forward, because it's all about movement and speed as we get 8th Company and 7th Company start their landing cycle. Casualties to 8th Company, not a good land straight away, but they start to move up, racing for their casualties. We've got Schwarzman assaulting the anti-aircraft platoon. He knocks out a gun vigorously and basically pushes on, even though he's only got pistols at this time. He then seeks refuge as small arms fire keeps coming at him, and he takes that crater with quite some delight, basically getting his troops into cover. Meanwhile, we've got 8th Platoon, their 8th Company, 1st Platoon, assaulting the 2 heavy machine guns. This was incredibly dicey, but he gets in, he takes a few casualties, but he's not pinned, and he makes a brutal assault, basically, against the end of that building. And effectively, they take it, destroying the 1st Dutch machine gun platoon, but they don't have enough to basically break through onto the 2nd Platoon, which is going to carry on firing and cause a lot of problems. They do, however, make a foothold, and that's rather critical in this situation. So they've got a foothold at Moerdijk. And at Moerdijk itself, there are 2 infantry platoons. But as we can see, we've got 7th Company moving up its 1st Platoon. The Dutch have still not been able to really unpin with their artillery. And we have the ferryman arrive at the port, and he's completely dumbfounded as civilians start to scream and panic with all the parachutes, the firing, and they're moving out. We've also got, basically, as I've said, 8th and 7th now moving forward as vigorously as they can. They're beginning to collect canisters, but unfortunately Schwarzman's man, who ran out for a canister, is machine gunned down by heavy machine gun fire. His secondary platoon, all 2 bases of it, is basically hunkered down in an irrigation ditch, but he sends his men forward and they clear some wire. Even only with pistols, they manage to remove a hole in the wire as the next wave of aircraft comes in, and basically one of these aircraft is shot at and damaged and has to basically abort and go round and come in again. As the rest of the jumps land, and a good landing basically by the 7th Platoon, 8th Company, but one of their aircraft again is shot down, and they're taking more and more casualties through this fire. Ultimately, they're driving forward, but as you can see, the casualties are mounting, and these platoons are depleted and will not get any relief. They've collected canisters. They keep the impetus going. Their weapons platoon moves up. These are 2 heavy machine guns, 1 50mm mortar and 1 anti-tank rifle. That's it, guys, for a company. And then basically moving forward, because they're traveling light and they're trying to get into Moerdijk. Those other machine guns are still firing. The irrigation ditches are proving very useful for the paratroopers, but they're also collecting, as I said, those canisters. And what we now see basically is in the town, the infantry are basically redeploying a little bit, basically to cover the attack, and the artillery finally unpins. And that is great news for them there, as the Germans start making a concerted effort now to go straight for the bridge. Their heavy machine guns start to fire. And what we've got is the 1st Platoon of 8th Platoon moving on the 2nd machine guns, Dutch machine guns, whilst effectively the AA gun, which was the only thing left, fails sole survivor and breaks. That leaves only the AA off table, which is a 1 dice roll effectively. At the farm, we've got 8th Company, 2nd Platoon making an assault around the big central tree, which I was inspired by. There's not a lot going on, but at the farm they're about to suffer a brutal assault by 2nd Platoon, who are armed up, and oh my god, their last platoon of aircraft comes in with their last thing is shot down, and they've got 2 survivor teams out of that. The AA guns have the anti-tank guns have done nothing. Schwarzman is moving forward desperately, trying to even poach other troops to fatten up his force to go for that control center, as effectively 1st Platoon that have broken through and destroyed this 1st machine gun now attack the 2nd machine gun position, and they're still not even armed up yet, going in, re-rolling successful hits. They've got all sorts of problems there. But they knock out the farm with their 2nd Platoon. Again, a vigorous attack, basically forcing the Dutch out. And the Dutch artillery comes in, and it's now really balanced, and it's so tense. Fortunately, all the aircraft have come in, but they've lost effectively three platoons shot down, plus landing casualties. It's heavy. And what we then suddenly see is, through a deck card, the arrival of Lieutenant Lem.